Okay, thank you. So we're now live streaming via Zoom. Welcome to the February meeting of the Breckland Area Museums Committee, and special welcome to Jenny Keynes, who will be giving us a presentation later on the Environment Hub, and John Ward, our chairman of the County Museums, and Jane James is also on the County Museums Committee. So welcome to those who are not necessarily normal attendees. And so the first item of business is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 22nd of November. That's page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, or have I gone too far? I've gone too far. Sorry, it stops at page 7. No, it goes right through to 13. Okay, has everyone agreed that the minutes are a correct record? Thank you. So, Ruth, could we have apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies from Andrew Smith, Councillor Fabian Eagle, Councillor Hilary Bushell, Councillor William Richmond, and Keith Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no chairman's announcements, and I have no urgent business. Are there any declarations of interest? I see none. Thank you. So if we can move on to the Ancient House Museum report from Oliver. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have, so you have before you the report for the Ancient House Museum. Section 1 relates to the COVID and service delivery and update during the last period. Just wanted to say that it's absolutely wonderful that the Ancient House is open and back in business and welcoming visitors, and it feels so good. It feels like we're coming into a sort of a fresh period with the spring approaching and visitors coming back to see us, so looking good. The County Council and Norfolk Museum Service have offered a cautious approach, I would say, to spread of infection of COVID, and the various measures that you would expect of us have been in place through this period. Ancient House, along with other museums, suffered a period of closure, some of last year and the year before. And as I say, it's wonderful to be back in business again. I don't want to sort of dwell too much on this section, so perhaps go through to section 2 and the sort of operation of the Ancient House report. So item 2 relates to the building works at Ancient House, and as you know from previous reporting, and those who visited Thetford and know the town will know that there's a slight sort of blot on the landscape in White Hart Street with our neighbour at Ancient House, the former King's Head pub, still shrouded in scaffolding after more than a year since that started. Ancient House has had scaffolding up to repair the roof, and contractors have been up to mend the junction between the two roofs, and that's had a good effect on the museum building. But we're hoping that at some point work will start again at the King's Head pub to good effect. Item 3.1, Princess Catherine Duleep Singh, one of the children of the Maharaja Duleep Singh, who lived at Elverton Hall near to Thetford. The Maharaja had 6 children from his first marriage, so we've got plenty of anniversaries that we can tap into. And this one is for Princess Catherine Duleep Singh, the second daughter of the Maharaja, and it was her 150th anniversary last October. And we've marked it with an exhibition at the museum with pop-up graphics telling her story and a display of some artifacts relating to her life. And we've also got on display a new commission of a painting relating to a new portrait of Princess Catherine and symbolism relating to her life. I also mentioned in this section that some of members will be familiar with the television program Antiques Road Trip. It's a very successful format that's been running for a few years, whereby 2 competing antiques people go around the country and purchase antiques in antique shops and then compete with each other to sell them at auction to make a profit. And interspersed, as they go around the country, they have a section which relates to something of cultural historical interest. Ancient House has been on Antiques Road Trip several times before. We know that when we go on the television, we do get extra visitors, which is brilliant. And they're coming back in a couple of weeks' time to do a section about Princess Catherine Duleep Singh. And we're fortunate that Peter Vance is going to come up and bring some extra objects for sharing on the programme. So we look forward to new audiences, new people coming to visit as a result of that. Item 3.2 is our main current exhibition at the moment, which is related to the Theta Treasure, a hoard of gold and silver that was found on the outskirts of Thetford in 1979. Normally at the British Museum, the trustees of the museum have kindly agreed to lend 11 items from the Theta Treasure for us to display at Ancient House. Combination of gold jewellery and inscribed silver spoons. And they've recently agreed to an extension of the display so that we can run it through into the summer. The exact date when those objects go back has to be decided, but it's been very successful and lots of people making special journey over to Thetford specifically to see this Theta Treasure. And the EDP helped us with a little piece on their online and I guess in the newspaper as well. 11 pieces of amazing treasure to see in Thetford right now. And I think on the back of that, we did get some extra visitors, which was good. We also display some amazing, if you haven't been to see it, it's well worth a visit. A hoard of Roman glass objects, painstakingly put together by our conservator colleagues, and that came from Hockwold. And these glass vessels are amazing and were found alongside some pewter and copper alloy objects as well. So it's not just the Theta Treasure, it's thinking about treasures more generally and late Roman religion.
Was there any religious significance in the use of glass to the Romans?
Probably, but what I would say is these objects relate to feasting, and there's a sort of connection here with the Theta Treasure objects, the spoons and such like, and I think that's probably what I would say regarding the glass.
Any other questions for Oliver before we move on to the next? Harry.
Do I need to press that one?
Yeah, thanks very much. Just to say, the Antiques Road Trip, I'm an avid watcher of all Antiques programmes. I just hope that perhaps our comms department can highlight that in advance, you know, that it's coming up. Obviously, you can see those things on podcasts, etc. And And just in case anyone is watching and assuring, we're not going to be watching people going into the Ancient House Museum and flogging off artifacts. They normally have one of the experts uses an opportunity, as they do on Flog It, which I also watch, and the Antiques Roadshow, as you'd expect. But I don't watch Bargain Hunt. But if on that, they also use that as an opportunity to visit the area and look at particular issues. It's not very, they don't always show as much on the slot that they've actually filmed, but it's obviously an opportunity, you say, to big up Ancient House and also the museum service. So I'm sure that will get picked up by the museum service, but just thinking of Breckland Comms might highlight it in advance, because it might show some things that people don't normally pick up online. They might see it on the box. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to reply to that?
Just to say, we've got good links with the Breckland Comms people, and I think that's a very good idea. And when we know the date of broadcast, we'll be in touch, because I think people locally will like to see as well.
Thank you, Oliver. So we go on to your 3.3.
So 3.3, as I've reported before, Ancient House is part of the Brex River and Fenage landscape project, and we've got funding through that scheme to deliver 2 exhibitions. The first one on the Vikings, and this is one we're working on at the moment. And we will be, we're involving our young people, which is a great sort of privilege for us at the Ancient House to be able to be working with a group of teenagers, and they'll be helping us curate one of the display cases in the exhibition. We'll be working again with the British Museum. They'll be lending some material from a Viking burial discovered in the 19th century at Santon, just in Norfolk. A Viking sword and 2 amazing sort of tortoise-shaped brooches that were discovered there, and also an amazing object found at Brandon. We're borrowing from Suffolk County Council some objects from the major excavation at Staunch Meadow at Brandon, and this gold plaque that's in the British Museum collections will form part of that, and will, I think, be displayed with the finds from Staunch Meadow, Brandon, together for the first time, which will be a brilliant thing to do. It's sort of what life was like in early medieval Britain on the eve of the Viking attacks that took place in the later 9th century. We're also going to be working with colleagues at Norwich Castle for loan of material, including recently discovered and acquired Viking period material as well.
Oliver, when's the opening of that exhibition likely to be?
It opens in the summer. And I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date, but it runs through from July, and it'll run for a whole year. The exhibition will run for a year. I can find out the date if that's helpful.
Terry.
Yeah, I just wanted to update Oliver and the committee, because I spoke at a previous meeting about the heritage trail that's in Thetford. There's 5 green sort of lecterns placed around, and one of them is dedicated to the Vikings. It's quite interesting. But over time, they sort of fell into disrepair, and all of the roundels that made up the trail had been removed, unfortunately. All of the lecterns and all of the roundels have now been replaced, and actually the whole trail is now ready to go. I'm not sure if there's any maps or sort of, actual, might be a bit of a mission to try and work your way around without a map, but I'd be very keen to link that in with the exhibition, because actually it does take in an awful lot of the river frontage. And as I say, one of them is specifically about the Vikings, but we didn't want to do 2 more until we've actually replaced them all. But I heard last week that they are now all done. So I'd be very keen to talk to Oliver about incorporating that into the exhibition, and encourage people that are taking part in the trail to come to the museum and have a look at, what you're doing.
Yeah, I think Leaping Hare had some of the older Viking trail leaflets, which I picked up for a friend a few weeks, well, a couple of months ago now, but if is will there be a new Viking Trail leaflet to correspond with A, the trail in Thetford, and B, the exhibition? And if not, why not?
Yes, we have a new publication in our sites, and also to say that this exhibitions project works hand in hand with a project run by Dr. Rick Hoggart, the River Raiders scheme, and he's been working with volunteers and also has a Vikings themed publication that will be coming out, I think, this summer as part of that. And just before I wind up on the Vikings, just to say that with archaeology, you're never sure what's going to be unearthed and come to light. And one of the things we've found is at Icknield Way in Thetford, building work to build some new houses have uncovered some very interesting Viking period artifacts, including 2 Anglo-Saxon carved stones, and we're working with the builders and the archaeologists who are writing the report to hopefully include one of these newly discovered grave markers in the exhibition, which would be you know, a great new thing that no one's seen before. So item 3.4 in the report relates to our plans to work with the 2024 100th anniversary of the museum to do more to tell the story of Maharaja Duleep Singh and his family. And we've got a draft project inquiry form that we'll be sharing with the National Lottery Heritage Fund to work out the best way to fund this project. And connected to that, I went to London to have a look at a portrait by George Beechey of Maharaja Duleep Singh, painted in 1852, before Duleep Singh came over to this country. So he's, I think he's a 13-year-old boy. And it's an amazing thing, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to display that at Ancient House. And if so, I think that would be a great draw for visitors interested in the story. And it goes hand in hand with a large leather-bound Bible they were reciprocal gifts. So the Bible was given to Duleep Singh, who'd recently converted to Christianity as a 13-year-old. And then this painting was given to Dalhousie, the Governor General of India.
Is that the Bible that's in the current display? Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention about Duleep Singh is we were successful in getting some funding working with Priya Atwal for her fellowship, sharing exchange fellowship. She works 1 day a week at Oxford University as a community history fellow. And we're working with her now on a research project, which has some funding to go towards an event that we'll stage in the summer. I'm thinking as part of the new Punjabi festival that's being planned by Indy Sandhu from Essex Cultural Diversity Project. And we met with Priya last week, and she's, as well as the funding towards the event, we're also going to be working with her with our new trainee, and I'll come to the trainee as I speak a bit later. But Priya will be able to help the trainee learn research skills to carry out research in archives. And also there's some funding for her to travel to London and as part of the research work. So item 4, school workshops. One of the things we've found is that teachers and schools are very, very keen to visit museums. And we've continued the workshops for school groups at Ancient House. And sometimes if there's a COVID outbreak in the school group, it has to revert to an online session. And I know Melissa Hawker, our learning officer, was doing several online sessions last week for schools. So she's had to be very nimble and adaptable. And in the report, I mentioned one sign of her adaptability is that she was asked for sessions covering the Mayans. Thetford doesn't have a very strong Mayan history, but she was able to come up with a good session to help the school teachers for that. And support for teachers, I mentioned in the report as well. And she's very experienced and good at helping children learn about local history. And it's also been working with teachers to help them in their delivery of local history topics. So if we move to section 5. And
sorry, any questions on those last two sections? It's John.
So section 5, 5.1, we continue to use social media to good effect at Ancient House, and followers on both Twitter and Facebook have been growing steadily. There's been good engagement rates, and we work with Liz Elmore, who looks after social media for the museum service generally. And again, Melissa Hawker does a lot of the work on social media, and there's been a lot of good engagement. Example of one of the national schemes that she's been working on has been the LGBT plus History Month in February, and posting content related to that. Item 5.3, we continue to do online talks, and this month, last day of the month, aren't we? This month we've been doing talks working with the Commonwealth Graves Commission, and we've had weekly talks from them about different aspects of their work. And then in January, we did a hybrid event. So it was both a combination of on-site book launch, but also online book launch. And it may be that this is something that we'll want to do more of in the future, whereby we can do things for a sort of small audience at the Ancient House, but broadcast it so that people can engage wherever they like around the world, in fact. The young people's groups, 5.4, have come back to Ancient House in person, and that's brilliant. Teenage History Club are working on an escape room event, which is going to be taking place on Saturday, this Saturday. And I've been helping them with the sort of the rearrangement or temporary rearrangement of the museum that's needed for the escape room. And we're looking forward to that on Saturday. It's sold out, I gather. Item 6, other museum developments. 6.1, volunteers. Currently, volunteering on site has been suspended, but we will be working with colleagues as the months progress to help enable volunteers to come back to working at Ancient House. And we've also got opportunities to try other kinds of volunteering and help, for example, with our new postcard collection, creating content and using local knowledge. I think would be a good one for involvement of people working from home who perhaps, it gives different opportunities, doesn't it, for volunteering. Textile groups, we're hoping the knitters and the spinners can come back to Ancient House. It's been a bit cold for them through the winter, to be honest, with the doors and windows open. But as the warmer weather comes, we're hoping to restart the textile groups again. Friends of the museum continue well, and I'm in regular contact with Keith Robinson and Dan Morgan from the Friends. We had our Christmas AGM and social at the end of November. Seemed to go well. Yeah, and 6.4, the Teaching Museum Trainee Scheme. We've just gone through a recruitment process, and we have a new trainee. She's called Katie Greson, and she'll be starting with us on April the 1st. And she'll be able to work with Dana Woolbright on the cataloguing of the postcard collection, and perhaps starting up this idea we have of volunteer, sort of remote volunteer, helping us with the description of the content of the postcards. Working with Priya on research skills that I mentioned. We've been given a Boy Scouts uniform from 1963, and there's lots of associated information to go with this. And one of our colleagues, Ruth Battersby Took, who works with the costume and textile collections for the county, has offered to work with the new trainee on accessioning, cataloguing and marking the Boy Scout uniform. So that's another great opportunity for Katie when she starts with us a bit later.
Is that a known local?
Yes.
I was probably in the Boy Scouts with them.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's all I've written down as notes to go with this. 6.6 media coverage. One of the good things about sort of making friends with people, and I think it probably came originally from a social media link up. So Priya Atwal, who I mentioned, who we're working with on this Oxford University funded project. She has kindly written for us a piece about Ancient House for the BBC History magazine, for a sort of their explorers bit for young people. So again, hopefully that will encourage more people to come and visit. And I think that concludes my report. Very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Oliver. It's good to see us get into national media such as BBC History magazine. Any more questions for Oliver? John.
So the Ancient House does have an admission charge, and the Lynn Museum in King's Lynn is the one that has a free period through the winter months, paid for with support from the Borough Council. But Ancient House, we do try to offer opportunities for free admission through the year. So for example, the Heritage Open Day scheme is one where we allow visitors to visit for free. There's several others like that. And actually coming up towards the end of March, we're offering for lottery players, linking into the National Lottery Scheme, an opportunity for people with a ticket to get free admission to Ancient House. And we're publicising that in the About Thetford magazine.
Thanks very much, Oliver. So if we can go on to Gresson Hall, and I think Robin, in Andrew's absence, is going to present that.
Thanks, Chairman. So yes, apologies from Andrew Smith for today. So I'm going to present Andrew's report on activities at Gresson Hall, and obviously covering the period November to January. It coincides with a period when the site is closed to general visitors, but as you'll have seen from the report, there's still an awful lot going on the site. But in terms of the section 1, Oliver's already described the fact that we are looking ahead more positively in terms of mitigating the impacts of COVID on our sites across the service actually. And in section 1 of both reports, you've got the long and difficult history of how, as a museum service, we've responded to the pandemic and the different actions we have taken during that period. And I just wanted to pay credit to the staff teams across the service for their sort of resilience and flexibility in terms of responding to what have been really difficult challenges, but have responded to those very creatively, both in terms of realising opportunities to get visitors back into our sites where possible, but also looking at different ways of engaging with audiences, particularly during the period of lockdown when the digital content, as members have seen from previous reports, was frankly extraordinary. So just wanted to sort of put on record really thanks to staff teams across NS. In terms of legal restrictions, as members will be well aware, all of those relating to museum sites have now been lifted. And in fact, the final legal requirement relating to museums was lifted on the 27th of January, and that related to the requirement to wear face coverings in certain indoor settings. But as Oliver has outlined, as a service and as obviously part of the County Council, we're continuing to take a very prudent approach to how we manage our sites to ensure that our staff and our visitors can be kept safe, whilst looking at opportunities clearly to extend the range of our activities. So if you go into our sites across the service, you'll still see recommendations that visitors wear face coverings if they're comfortable doing that, and that they follow respectful distancing, and all of the other infrastructure, the hand sanitizers, everything else remains in place. But we have seen a sort of managed increase in the number of activities taking place, and Oliver's report sort of shows some of that in practice actually. In terms of how we're managing COVID going forward, clearly we continue to take a sort of prudent approach. With our historic museum buildings, we've obviously faced significant challenges throughout the pandemic. We don't have the luxury of mechanical air handling systems, so we're reliant on slightly more traditional methods like opening doors and opening windows, and certainly that's not something museums tend to want to do because of the effect it has on environment and security, etc. So we're trying to sort of work through what should then become a standard way of operating going forward. And to help us with that, we've actually just taken receipt of some CO2 monitors across the service, which will help us to manage spaces, particularly those used by staff and volunteers in back office areas. Something we're very anxious to do, as Oliver touched on, is to see an increase in opportunities for volunteers to come back to site. We've been maintaining outdoor volunteering across the service, and Gresson obviously has a number of outdoor teams that have been operating for several months. What we're looking to do is provide opportunities for indoor volunteers to get back working with us, because we know there's a huge appetite for that, and we know also the sort of well-being and health benefits that volunteering can bring. And whilst we've been maintaining contact with our volunteer teams throughout the pandemic, we know that there's a very strong desire, not surprisingly, on the part of volunteers to return to site. So the process we're going to be going through over the next few months, including monitoring of CO2 devices, is to enable us to assess which spaces we can safely use for volunteers, and begin to bring back volunteers in a sort of managed and phased way. And hopefully we'll be in a position to do that across the service actually after Easter. And that is one of our key priorities at the present time. We've also seen a return of staff to offices. Clearly throughout the pandemic, our frontline staff, our visitor services staff, our premises staff, our learning staff have been on site working with visitors, and we've opened sites whenever we've been legally able to do that. But in common with lots of other organisations, a number of our back office staff, in inverted commas, continue to work largely from home. But we are, as a service, looking to provide increased opportunities for staff to come back into the workplace. And we have been seeing that over the last few months, again, in a managed way, but with curators needing access to collections, design and conservation staff needing access to on-site resources. We've been facilitating that return to work on a sort of managed basis over a number of months. So the momentum of that, I think, will increase.
I think we've got a question from Mark Kittle-Morris.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one. I notice in 1.4 you mentioned site capacity limits have been increased. Are you running at, what are you running at now? Both sites really. The question applies to both Ancient House and Gresson Hall, especially internally. Obviously, you're all internal at Ancient House, but obviously internally at Gresson Hall. What sort of capacity are you running at?
In terms of general visitors at Gresson Hall, I'll let Oliver respond for Thetford, but we're largely at normal, what would be characterised as normal capacity now. There are certain parts of the building where we do have challenges around occupancy levels. The majority of our visitors now are walk-ins, so members will recall that during the much of the pandemic period, we were signposting people, indeed requiring people at various stages to pre-book using time tickets to then help us manage those numbers. But as we move to seeing probably about 80% of our visitors, 90% in some cases now coming in as they would normally have done before COVID as walk-ins, obviously how we manage visitor numbers, it becomes a bit more challenging. We are still putting on some limits. So, for example, with our schools at Gresson Hall, and that's primarily related to looking at those periods when schools traditionally come together for certain activities. So often at Gresson Hall on a school event day, you'll have 2 or 3 separate schools on site. Sometimes those schools come together for combined activities. So obviously managing that has been tricky because different schools take different approaches. And we've been looking to facilitate those schools staying apart if they wish to. But I think again, after Easter, we're going to see a return to, something much more like our pre-COVID approaches. So in terms of general site capacity, I think we are sort of returning to a more normal level. I think that will sort of build as we go into the spring, and I think after Easter, I think there's very much an assumption that we will be back to pretty much 100% occupancy levels. Although in some parts of the site, particularly at Gresson Hall, and I'm sure Oliver will comment on this in terms of Ancient House, there will still be areas where there remain concerns around ventilation levels. These are sort of gallery spaces and other spaces where there isn't a means of providing natural ventilation. So we'll need to take a cautious approach to those. But I think as we go into the spring, certainly at Gresson Hall and a number of other sites around the service, we'd be looking to get back to something akin to 100% occupancy. If Oliver wants to comment on it.
Yes, just to say that Ancient House, of course, being much smaller site, we need to be careful that it doesn't get too crowded and the numbers of people in the building are monitored and controlled. And one of the areas that we do that is when we have a school visit, we don't have general visitors come in to see it when we have a school in. The school, in effect, takes over the whole building. So what we do is we ask people to come back after the school is visited, come back a bit later and do it that way. We did have, when we have an event like the Heritage Open Day that we did last time, we had to, which is a day when often we get very busy, we needed to put in place a queuing system outside. And I think, Robert, you were able to see queuing in operation on that day.
Yeah, there was sort of 40 to 50 people in the queue at some time, I think, which is to be encouraged.
And just finally to say the carbon dioxide monitors, which Robin mentioned, are useful tools for us to help. We know that Ancient House is quite, in the best of times, it's a drafty building. And you can see a little bit of daylight between the daub and the timbers. So we know that there's good air exchange, but the carbon dioxide monitors will help us do that sort of assessment in a more scientific way. And we've deployed them around the building, and they'll be able to help us decide about numbers a bit more scientifically.
So what is the action level for CO2 levels?
Well, the monitors, they have different sort of reporting on them. There's a little green flashing light, and then it turns to an amber flashing light, and then there's a red flashing light. And when there's a red flashing light, you have to sort of ask people to move out of the space or open all the doors and windows to make sure that the air, the oxygen and air is better.
And just to add to that, in terms of the CO2 monitoring, we're obviously working with colleagues in the County Council's health and safety team around the thresholds, which obviously reflect HSE guidance. So as Oliver said, that the units that are going to be used across NMS will provide sort of room level alerts to staff in terms of, is there a problem in this space? And that's based on sort of parts per million. So basically 800 parts per million of CO2 is fine. And then there's a sort of amber period going up to 1500 where the red light goes off and you need to take some action. And each area where we're using these CO2 monitors, there'll be sort of advice to staff in that area about what to do in the event of the monitor going red. And that might be open the window, open the door, reduce the level of occupancy. It will depend on an area by area basis. But these units are quite clever, and they also link into the LoRaWAN network, which the County Council has used over a number of years, I think now. And what that will provide us with is effectively a dashboard, so we can monitor CO2 levels within the individual spaces. And that then gives us really helpful intelligence about where there are sort of worrying peaks. So we had some of these units on test before Christmas over in Time and Tide Museum in Great Yarmouth, actually in the education room there, working with the corporate copy team. And you can literally see when the school comes in for lunch in terms of peaking of CO2, not to hazardous levels, but it does show how you can use these devices to review occupancy levels within spaces where you have a concern, and then identify if those spaces need to have additional action taken, or if indeed the CO2 levels, because of other things like drafty doors and windows, are actually not a problem. And this is going to take a number of months, I think, to work through. So I think, going back to Mark's question, I think the general admission levels, we expect to see those ramping up. The pinch points will be, as Oliver said, those peaks around things like event days. And at sites like Gresson, it's not so much the numbers of visitors you've got on site, it's the pressure on key locations like toilets, cafe, etc., and how you manage those. So I would expect to see ongoing sort of management of those types of events to mitigate risks. And obviously what we'll have to do, collectively is understand how people adapt their behaviour in terms of things like respectful distancing and wearing of face coverings, etc. And what that then means for any action that we need to take as a service. So I think we're all going to be finding our way a little bit with this over the next few months, and the museum service is no different to that. But I think, just to come back to the comment Oliver made, I think we're very sort of optimistic actually that as we get beyond Easter, we should be in a position to offer something much more like our pre-COVID level of service, which would be fantastic. Right.
Thank you. So on to your next section.
So the next section, section 2 of the report, details with events, and not surprisingly, in a period where we're closed to the public, there haven't been that many events. So there has been a tree pruning workshop, but this period over the winter is traditionally a time where there's a lot of work carried out on the site, and obviously a lot of planning work around the future event programme. A reminder that Gresson reopens to the public on the 14th of March, and there is a full programme in place across the year, including events and exhibitions. So I'll pause there, Chairman, if anybody has any questions on events.
Any questions on forthcoming events? None.
Moving on to section 3, other museum developments under 3.1, a really interesting exhibition project coming up in the summer. So we currently have the More in Commons exhibition, which is being extended, but we also are then welcoming a new exhibition, Georgie Meadows Stitch Drawings, which is a touring exhibition through the Wellcome collection, and that's going to be running throughout the 2022 season. So that exhibition is being worked on by the new Gresson curator, Rachel Kidd, working with the County Exhibitions Officer, Philip Miles. Item 3.3, the Farmers Foundry. Members will have seen previous reports around this really interesting project to restore and then get up and working the Farmers Foundry Company steam engine, which will then power a lot of the steam-driven kit in the steam gallery at Gresson Hall. And Rachel Kidd, the project curator, has been working with the volunteer team, and we're looking to get the Farmers Foundry up and running for the new visitor season. And training plan is being put together to enable the volunteers to operate that equipment safely. So that'll be a really nice addition to Gresson Hall, and obviously will enable us to have steam up days, which are a very sort of popular part of many of the events that we run on site. Moving on to the farm, section 3.4, as members will be aware from this report and from press coverage that they may have picked up, we've actually welcomed 2 new Suffolk Punch horses, purchased with support, as always, from the Friends of Gresson Hall, for which we're very grateful. Jack and Kingsman, I'm not sure about the name of the Kingsman, but there we are. Really important addition to the farm, and very much part of the commitment to maintain the working heavy horse offer at Gresson Hall, and that continually needs review and investment and planning for the future, because not surprisingly, the horses get older, and we do sort of they are such a key part of the site offer at Gresson Hall, that it's important that as some of the horses get a bit older and their range of activity understandably reduces, we are then bringing forward young horses that can take on that role in future. And members who've been on this committee for a number of years will be very familiar with that process, and we have seen a number of horses join the team at Gresson Hall that have then gone on to become sort of mainstays of the heavy horse offer.
How long does it take till after accession that they can sort of interact with the public?
Well, it's very individual to the horse, and obviously one of the key things that Richard Dalton, who is our farm manager and an expert horseman, is looking to assess is their character and their behaviour, and particularly the way in which they interact with the public, because we need to be very confident that any heavy horses we have on site are Because basically, if you know, if they get spooked, they're going to be going through hedges and going across fences, and that's not what you want. So, and we have had horses that we have brought to site in the past that haven't proved themselves to be suitable in that type of environment, and we've then had to find alternative homes for them. So you're looking at, you know, a number of years for that level of confidence to be grown, and the range of activities to be extended. And often they initially begin operating at a very simple level, often working with one of the more established horses, and the level of activity they're asked to undertake obviously builds up as physically they develop.
And is there a next generation of horsemen?
Sorry.
Is there a next generation of the horsemen?
Well, that's a very good question. So something we've been looking to do, you know, again over many years at Gresson is think about that sort of succession planning for experts like Richard Dalton, and we are very reliant on a small number of people with that level of specialist expertise. We do obviously feed into wider Suffolk Punch heavy horse networks, and they've been a really sort of important source of expertise and advice over many years. So we're not sort of standing alone in that regard. And what we've also looked to do is in the past run sort of apprenticeship programs and training programs to try and identify and build those heavy horsemen of the future. But it is a risk. It is a risk area for the site. We know Suffolk Punch breed is itself, you know, endangered, and some of the skills around managing heavy horses, and particularly that breed, are again in very short supply. So whilst we do what we can to mitigate that in terms of those wider partnerships, in terms of looking at sort of training and development opportunities, working with volunteers, you know, that is a risk area. Absolutely. We're going to be talking at the end of this meeting about, or providing members with an update on the environmental hub project at Gresson, and part of that obviously is very visible for those of you that have been to the site in recent months, in terms of the creation of the new tree nursery at the back of St Nicholas's barn, and we'll be talking a little bit about that later on. But just to sort of note the fact that the farm team at Gresson have been really supportive of the environmental hub project, and have been working closely with colleagues from the environment team within Norfolk County Council to ensure that any developments on site are appropriate and fit with the overall sort of feel and ethos of the farm. Moving on to social media, 3.6, Oliver has sort of commented on how important this is, obviously, for sites across the service. We do have a detailed report on social media activity for both Ancient House and Gresson, which we can attach to the minutes of this meeting and share with members in that way. And you've got the links in the report to the various social media channels that Gresson uses. Not surprisingly, in February, the top social media activity related to the arrival of the new horses. So that's great, and you know, and they remain absolutely critical for our social media activity. And it's really good to sort of maintain awareness of Gresson Hall and the site offer during the winter season. So stories like that really important. As I say, we'll share the detailed report as part of the minutes for this meeting. So I'll pause at that point, Chair.
Any questions for Robin? No.
Moving on to section 4, friends, obviously mindful we've got Heather with us this morning. So.
Thank you. We're finding our feet because essentially most of us are new Friends Committee. We're working on building up our Facebook page, which we've had running for about a year, but it's very difficult to add articles to it other than what comes out from the museum itself, not being on site. Obviously we were really excited to pay for the horses well, not pay for them, but to see them in the flesh. And they're really cute, and I don't like horses, so certainly not big ones anyway. And yeah, we're just seeing where we can help out, trying to encourage volunteers to be able to ask for funding that the museum itself can't help with, going through formal channels that we're developing, and being a bigger presence on site is essentially what the project, or what we're working on for the coming year, so that we actually can be at all the events, rather than sitting in the background, which obviously developed the last 2 years. It was fairly quiet. So, but it's, yeah, quite good so far.
Just to say sort of thank you for your input at the museum service, and we are aware that you can, or the Friends organisations can attract funds that aren't directly available from time to time. But we've seen some successes in the past, and hope that that continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to echo that, and obviously that perhaps one of the most visible things the Friends at Gresson will do is support the heavy horse programme, and that's really important. But they also have supported the site in many other ways. And it's really sort of encouraging to see, you know, the Friends on a sort of firm footing. So we're sort of very happy to continue working with the Friends to develop that sort of partnership approach. In terms of volunteering, 4.2, Rachel Kidd, our curator at Gresson, obviously leads on coordinating the volunteer teams at Gresson, working with the NMS service-wide volunteer coordinator, Michelle Gaskin. And as I mentioned previously, we have seen the resumption of outdoor volunteering. In some cases, that's been happening for a number of months now in terms of gardening and landscape volunteering. But we've also been, again, safely planned, but seeing resumption of other sort of volunteering activity around the Farmers Foundry engine by the steam volunteer team, and the ongoing maintenance work on the Panhard car by Team Panhard volunteers. But again, in common with other sites across the service, also looking at opportunities to engage with volunteers remotely, and the transcription of the Workhouse Governor minutes is a good example of that. Something Gresson has been developing sort of a number of years, and certainly pre-COVID, was that sort of more hybrid approach to volunteering, because not every volunteer can necessarily come to site. So to provide those other opportunities for volunteers to get involved is really important. And I think that's something that will increasingly be a feature of sort of volunteering opportunities across the service, because whilst it's super to welcome volunteers physically back to site, it's also good to increase the range of volunteering opportunities as well. And that's been one of the small silver linings, if you like, from COVID, is the fact we have actually in many cases grown our volunteer numbers because of the opportunity to provide different ways to support the operation of the service. I'll pause there, Chairman, if anybody has any questions.
John.
Thank you. Just a comment about the Panhard car. I was very fortunate some years ago to have a ride in that. I haven't seen it out moving about in the last couple of years. Is it still sort of road legal?
I'll need to just check in terms of its current sort of registration status, but certainly the Panhard team have been actively maintaining the car throughout the pandemic. It's obviously not been out and about in the way it would normally be for events, not only on site, but at other locations. But that would only be a temporary sort of break in that level of service, to be honest. So the Panhard has been, as I say, actively maintained by the team, and we'd expect it to be engaging fully in events on site and off site going forward. And one of the challenges the team have always faced is the amount of work required to make sure it can run on public roads. And I had, well, many years ago, I did have the fantastic opportunity of having a drive on the site, briefly, slightly terrifying, but and it's an extraordinary thing, and again, a real testimony to the hard work of the volunteer team there over many years. But absolutely, we'd be looking to get it fully operational this year.
And I presume the chairman of the museums committee has to walk in front with a red flag.
Yes, probably not when I'm driving though. It's like a slightly manic lawnmower. But yes, very extraordinary thing, and such a wonderful asset at Gresson. Moving on to section 5, Chairman, in terms of schools, echoing again Oliver's comments, it's been really pleasing to see the strong level of demand from schools for visits to museums, and we've sort of seen that across the service actually. And considering how challenging it is for schools just to open the doors, the appetite for schools to come out and make museum visits has been really, really pleasing. And I think it's testimony to the fact that over many years, teachers have recognised that by coming to our sites, they get a really good quality experience, that it's well managed, and that the learning outcomes are really strong. So I think the appetite for schools to come back reflects that long history of really high quality learning provision across NMS, and particularly as we discussed at both Ancient House and Gresson Hall. Things did take a bit of a bump with Omicron. We were seeing strong levels of bookings, and indeed across the service we were pretty much fully booked for available slots over the autumn term and spring term. Omicron did have some localized effects in terms of schools, not surprisingly, having to cancel visits at short notice, but we obviously accommodated that, and pleased to say that booking levels remain really strong. And whilst we are maintaining a digital offer for schools, I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of schools are desperate to get back onto site, because that learning outside the classroom experience is what they value. And with school children having been isolated, and whether it's at home or at school, the importance of these visits to external sites has perhaps never been more important. The Gresson learning team continues to work really effectively and to meet the needs of schools. They've recently completed and submitted an application for the Stanford Award for Heritage Education, which is a national sort of benchmark for high quality learning provision. Gresson has been a holder of that award in previous years, and we've no reason to doubt that the application won't be successful again this time. And that really sort of underlines the strength of the offer, not just in terms of the quality of the learning experience itself, but all of the wraparound elements, all the risk assessments and logistical elements that make for a successful school visit. I'll pause there.
Certainly the schools program is a key part of what you do, and I think it assists your overall priority for funding at the county council. We hope so anyway. Thank you.
Moving on to section 5.2, partnerships. In addition to sort of the core schools offer of the learning team at Gresson, obviously work with a broad range of other partners and groups. There's been a long-standing partnership with the virtual school sensory support team. In the past, Gresson has hosted family days for the SSS, which have been very successful. And we're looking to sort of build that up again this year. The learning team have also been working with Dads Matters groups, again, to support dads and how they engage with their children. And also working with the adult learning and library team around a group from Dereham, looking at how adults can be encouraged into further learning. So just a few examples of the way in which the learning team not only are delivering the core schools programs, but also looking at other opportunities to support partnerships that realise the opportunities that a site like Gresson Hall has. Moving on to Kick the Dust, there's a sort of more detailed county-wide report at the end of this Gresson Hall report that the Gresson Hall team obviously maintain an active involvement with the Kick the Dust project, and Rachel Duffield, one of the project workers for Kick the Dust, is based at the site. And in Gresson Hall, they've been focusing on providing work experience opportunities for young people in a structured way, running over 10 to 12 weeks. So these are around opportunities for young people to find out more about a career in the cultural sector, and then looking at opportunities for them to develop experience over the course of an extended period based around sort of work placements. So that's a model that's worked very successfully in the past.
Do they have any transport difficulties in getting to Gresson Hall, or is that supported?
Gresson Hall has, as members are aware, sort of some challenges around transport. So that's always part of the planning around these types of activities, and is how those transport barriers can be mitigated. So some of that is around having a mix of on-site and digital, and some of it is providing support for young people to visit. But that sort of travel planning is always part of thinking at a site like Gresson Hall, where public transport is challenging, to say the least. Section 5.4 will be giving members an update on the work of the Gresson Environmental Hub at the end of this meeting. So I'll skip over that section, but you have there details about some of the ways in which the learning team at Gresson have been actively supporting the work of the Environment Hub. And then section 6, Chairman, is the regular update on the progress of the Kick the Dust Norfolk project, which is our sort of flagship youth engagement project, working with young people aged 11 to 25, principally aged 16 to 25. At the moment, largely funded through the National Lottery Heritage Fund and delivered in partnership with a number of key groups, including YMCA. And what you have in the report for this meeting is the latest summary of data up until the end of January 2022. And you can see that from the beginning of the project back in October 2018 to the end of January of this year, there have been 11,000 interventions involving over 3,500 individual young people, taking part in over 5,300 hours of quality activity, 262 volunteering opportunities provided to 124 young people. So, as reported in previous meetings of this committee, Kick the Dust is a project that's actually grown significantly during the pandemic period. It was able to respond very effectively to those changing requirements, was able to provide both digital outlets, but also provided a number of ways for people to engage who were in digital poverty during the pandemic. And we have seen numbers of participants grow quite significantly during the period of COVID. We've also seen increasing numbers of young people progressing through the scheme, building confidence, building skills, getting more actively engaged in not only participating, but shaping the direction of the project, which is what it was all about. We've seen 4 young people now progress on to Kick the Dust funded trainee bursary schemes, and a Kick the Dust participant recently joined the Teaching Museum scheme that Oliver was describing earlier. We've also had 3 other young people join the steering group for the project as young ambassadors and young people's champions. So it's really pleasing to see young people taking real ownership and control of this project as it moves into its final phase of National Lottery Heritage Fund funding. In the report, you've also got a lot of the Evaluation data. This is a project that's been very tightly evaluated, and we've been able to benchmark performance with this project, with other Kick the Dust projects happening across the country. And there's 12 other Kick the Dust projects running. And as we reported to previous committees, consistently, and it's not a competition, frankly, but, we have seen in terms of that benchmarking, the Kick the Dust Norfolk project performing particularly strongly. And there are some really telling sort of stats, I think, on page 27 of the report. 80% of young people felt there were more jobs for young people like themselves to work in heritage. 90% young people said they learned new and interesting things about the heritage. 81% said they'd be more likely to become a volunteer. And 96% of young people said they felt welcomed and respected by staff. And this project is not only just about engaging with young people, it's also about training staff and building that confidence in the wider staff teams to ensure that engagements with young people across Norfolk Museum Service are positive. And it's nice to see that sort of coming through into the evaluation data from the young people. We are approaching the end of the National Lottery Heritage Fund funding for this project, which runs up until the end of November 2022. We are actively exploring new funding opportunities to maintain momentum with this important project. And I'm actually in a meeting later on today with colleagues from YMCA Leicester, who are anxious to work with us. And that's in a meeting that's been encouraged by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So we're pursuing a number of funding options to enable the key parts of this project to be sustained. And there's a real commitment within Norfolk Museum Service to maintain momentum with what has been a really impactful project. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. So working outside as far away as Leicester, is that in an attempt to sort of spread the word more widely, or is this very specific opportunities?
So this is a meeting with a partnership called Y Heritage, who are one of the other 12 Kick the Dust projects currently operating. And we are currently working with YMCA Norfolk, which has been a really successful partnership. And the discussions with Y Heritage are around looking at potentially developing a joint project application to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which would see the sort of real key sort of successes of both projects coming together, particularly around work experience and skills development for young people leading into employment. And both projects have developed a really interesting approach to doing that. And we think there may be some good opportunities to link those together, but it's also about looking at how some of that learning can be shared across the heritage sector, particularly within museums. And the discussions involve looking at how we could both work with our regional museum development services to share good practice around working with young people, and particularly working with young people in terms of development of skills. So very early days yet, but this could potentially be a project that would see a sort of trans-regional approach to providing best practice examples about how museums and others in the heritage and cultural sectors could get actively involved in rethinking their own offers, building on the track record of what's been successful, both for NMS and for the Y Heritage Partnership.
Well, that all sounds very encouraging. Yes, Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to read that particular section and learn a bit more about it. Actually, it's really encouraging. Just 2 points, if I may. What would be particularly interesting is if we were able to identify how many young people had never really engaged with the museum before, but then as a result of this project, actually their engagement continued, as we come to the end of it, and sort of track that journey, if you like, because I suspect an awful lot of them now, having been involved, will become regular visitors in the future, one would hope. The other thing I was going to mention is that it's in its early days, but Breckland actually is developing a Jubilee Bursary scheme for individuals to access further education. And is up to was £30,000 in total. But I would imagine a number of those young people actually would want to carry on and do additional learning and may be able to access some of that bursary. As I say, it's very early days and I don't think it's been confirmed, but that is on the horizon for some point this year. And it'd be wonderful to get some of those young people who want to carry on and do some additional learning around that to maybe apply for the bursary.
Yeah, I think that bursary scheme opens on the 2nd of June, which is the, well, no, it's just, that was the corresponding date for the coronation. I think that's where it comes in.
Thank you, Jimmy. Very interesting questions. In terms of that sort of progression tracking, that's something we have been actively doing throughout the project. And one of the aspirations of the project was always around young people genuinely progressing. So starting with those sort of first activities where they just come as a participant and then actually moving through the program, the sort of player shaper leader model, where they then get actively involved in developing their own projects and activities, and then ultimately taking that more leadership role where they're perhaps joining the steering group, taking on a bursary placement or a teaching museum placement, or getting involved as an active volunteer. And we have been doing, as part of the evaluation for the Heritage Fund, some tracking of our young people, and also looking to do that where possible once they've left the programme as well, and certainly provide some more information on that. But it has been very encouraging to see a number of young people that have, gone on that journey through the programme and are now actively involved in sort of leading projects, in mentoring others, in steering the sort of planning of the project through the steering group, but also getting involved in long-term volunteering. So and in some cases securing jobs. So we've now had a number of young people who've basically got jobs on the back of their involvement with this program, which is great, or indeed have gone on to education on the back of involvement with this program. And that's what it was all about. So being able to evidence that is really important. And thank you for that note about the bursary. And we're very alert to sort of any opportunities at the moment for sort of complementary funding, and obviously elected members identify anything they think may be relevant, please do get in touch. We are pursuing a number of avenues at the moment around future funding for this program, and I'm very aware that there's a sort of really strong sort of a positive feel towards this program for members. So it's something we're very much prioritising with the service at the moment.
Is there a mechanism by which they can sort of be given a sort of, say, a 3 years access after they leave the scheme, to keep that, get that continuity there?
We already have that in place. We have a Kick the Dust free admission card, which has been running, well, it predates COVID. It was introduced about a year after the project started, and basically every young person who participates in Kick the Dust gets a free admission card, and that gives them free admission to any NMS site. Obviously COVID, was a bit of a bump along the road with that, but that's a scheme we will be sort of continuing to offer as we go forward.
Any more questions? Okay. Jenny, how long is your presentation?
About 15 minutes.
Okay, so if we go straight into that then, unless anyone wants a 5-minute break. No, we'll go straight into that then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So Jenny and I are going to sort of double hand this presentation, so which I'm sure will go very well. The tech is running, so that's great. So Just by way of introduction, very pleased to be here this morning to talk about the Gresson Environmental Hub. It's something we have briefed members on at previous meetings. What I was going to do was just give a very brief introduction and then hand over to Jenny. So perhaps we could go to the next slide, Ruth. Excellent. The Gresson Environmental Hub, as we've mentioned in previous meetings, is all around providing a sort of shop window, if you like, for the County Council's environment policy and work around responding to climate change, mindful that Gresson has already got a strong track record of interpreting the environment, and the members will be aware of that. That seemed a very sort of logical opportunity for Gresson Hall to really be a focal point for helping communicate some of those environmental messages to a wider audience. There are also opportunities at Gresson Hall clearly to actively support some of those environmental priorities, including the million trees for Norfolk, and the community tree nursery is a very good example of that, something happening in practice. Gresson Hall is clearly a great space. It's a huge asset to Norfolk, and it provides a lot of opportunities for collaboration and learning, both through our existing programming and through the development of new programming. And to sort of realise those opportunities as fully as possible, we're also looking at being in a position where we can provide not only good outdoor spaces, but an increased range of indoor facilities to support the work around this important area. And in the presentation, we're going to sort of outline some of the works that are happening to provide these more flexible and usable spaces. The work on the environmental hub, certainly the capital works are funded through the Norfolk County Council capital programme. And we're also working closely with colleagues from the Norfolk County Council environment team, as well as with a broad range of other partners and stakeholders. But Jenny's going to walk you through some of the actual activity that's been taking place on site as part of this really interesting new development of Gresson Hall.
So can we the next slide, please, Ruth? So the south wing at Gresson Hall was previously home to the historic environment team, and the team's vacated now, and they're relocated at their new homes at either County Hall, Norfolk Record Office and Shire Hall. So the rooms are being cleared to make way for refurbishment for the hub, and we'll have 3 spaces in this corridor, the south wing, that you can see. We're creating a flexible teaching space, which will be available to hire, a more formal meeting room, and a teaching space for sort of creative, more of a messy space. And a touchdown room for smarter working for NCC staff remains. And there are some important features of the early days of the workhouse which remain in this wing of the building. You can see in the top right image there, the arched windows. These would have once been open arches, like open arcades, a bit like cloisters alongside the corridor. And inside were at least, we think, 6 cottages, little cottages, which were occupied by family groups in the workhouse period. But none of the modifications we're carrying out as part of this project are invasive. It mainly includes redecoration, new flooring, and efficiency improvements to heating and lighting. And we've been consulting with the Conservation Officer, Andrew Gayton, all the way through as part of planning the project. Next slide. So these are the spaces which will provide activity, the environmental hub, and they're shown here in their empty and vacated state. So the largest of the rooms, the right-hand image there with the blue pillar in the middle, this is the one which will be, it'll be equipped with immersive technology. It will allow us to, and flexible furniture. It will allow us to have talks, small conferences, informal and formal learning, and hybrid meetings. The room in the middle will be used for school groups mainly, and community groups and volunteer groups. And this is one where we can have some sort of hands-on, a bit more kind of messy interactive activities. And the far room on the far left, this is the one which will be equipped again with immersive technology to allow a more formal meeting space. Next slide, please. So we've been working with the IT team at Norfolk County Council to spec the sort of technology, pretty much the same sort of thing that we've got in this space here that we will be specing for our two of the repurposed rooms. This image here shows one of the recently refurbished basement rooms in County Hall. So this is the sort of thing that we're looking at, smart TVs and the like. Next slide, please, Ruth. So the project includes access improvements at the south wing. We're creating a new accessible toilet, level access into the main door and out through the fire escape door. So it's really important to us that the hub becomes fully accessible to staff and volunteers. Next slide, please, Ruth. So you may be familiar with these two doors. That's the main door, right image is the main door into the south wing, and the left image is will be our fire escape route. So these ramps are being improved to allow for level access. Then if we could have the next slide. We are extending this existing pathway that you can see running along the side of the marquee that goes down to the cafeteria. We're extending that along the wall of the cafeteria to join the main path to the car park. So visitors or staff who arrive to take part in activities at the hub and who park at the car park, visitors with mobility issues or who use a wheelchair will be able to get level access directly into the hub. So Robin's mentioned the Gresson Hall Community Tree Nursery. It's another part of the environmental project. It's funded, so the works at the tree nursery, sorry, next slide, Ruth, sorry. Works at the tree nursery and a project post have been funded separately by DEFRA, and the community tree nursery has been established over the last 6 months down on Union Farm. We have a dedicated trees outside woodlands project officer, and she's recruited a team of 12 volunteers, and they've been meeting weekly since the autumn actually, and they've been assisting with landscaping at the tree nursery, building raised beds, and they've been collecting seeds from our site and from neighbouring farms. We talked a little bit already about volunteers, and the development of the volunteer team is going to be crucial to this part of the project, and it builds on that existing excellent work that volunteer base at Gresson Hall, where there are currently over 150 active volunteers. So some of them have joined this team and some of them are brand new recruits. So we will be growing trees at the nursery, but the aims are really to inspire others to get growing and to develop activities for schools and community groups, and volunteers will be on hand to chat to our visitors when we reopen next month. So this is just another view of the nursery looking up from the pathway at the bottom, and shows the all important rabbit proof and deer proof fencing that went in just before. So one of the key aims of the Gresson Hall Environmental Hub is to communicate and engage with the public, and the learning and engagement programme linked to the hub is underway with the appointment of our project funded learning officer, Ben Earl. And Ben's been busy establishing project partnerships. He's been working with the UEA and an organisation called SOS UK, which is Students Organising for Sustainability. Ben's also been developing 3 on-site workshops for schools, which will roll out in the spring. And they are exploring environmental issues through the history and the collections of Gresson Hall Farm and Workhouse. He's also been devising an outreach pilot programme, working with a local primary school, St Mary's at Beatley, and that will be delivered in the spring as well. And this is a pilot scheme which will support local schools to deliver outside classroom learning. And Ben's also been working with Sir Isaac Newton Sixth Form College in Norwich and their Environmental Sciences Department, and they've developed a non-examined assessment for their students, working directly in partnership with the hub. And we're also planning a biodiversity conference aimed at A-level students later on this year. And that conference will provide hands-on activities and will share information with A-level students who might be considering a career in environmental science. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we mentioned events at Gresson Hall, and our large-scale events really going to offer us the opportunity to engage with the public. And just before the site closed for winter, Apple Day was attended by around 1,800 visitors. Most of you are probably aware it's one of the largest events that run at Gresson Hall. Last year it was scaled down slightly to limit numbers on site for safe social distancing, but we were really delighted with the numbers of people we could engage with. And all of the activities centred around the hub took place down on the farm, and colleagues talked to around 500 people, which was brilliant. It was the first opportunity to trial some activities and also to speak to the public about the hub. And in this slide here, you can see my colleague Ben, and him and Emma Cross, the Trees Outside project officer, were showing children how to extract seeds from apples, and also talked about seed collecting, seed stratification. There are a couple of other projects running with our colleagues in the environment team. These projects were also present at Apple Day. Visitors were guided through the interactive Norfolk Trees and Hedges map, which is linked to the Norfolk County Council website. And the image on the right there that you can see, these are visitors being shown how they can look at this map online. It's an interactive map. It uses historic maps and live data to show tree planting and also the heights of existing trees. So visitors could sort of zoom in on their locality and see if there are gaps that they thought that could do with tree planting, again, linked to the 1 million trees for Norfolk scheme. And on the left-hand image there, that's colleagues from a European funded project called Monument. And Monument supports people living with mild and moderate dementia and their carers to access green spaces to improve their physical health and their mental health for well-being. So they're two projects which are very much linked to our purposes as well. So we'll be continuing with public engagement throughout the course of the year. We've got a few events coming up quite soon. In May, it's Deering Day, so we'll have colleagues in the town telling people about the Gresson Hall Environmental Hub. We have our first bookable event for visitors on the 22nd of May, which is Bee Day. So visitors can actually come along to the hub and learn about beekeeping. And then Open Farm Sunday, again, usually we do usually have Open Farm Sunday at Gresson Hall. It's another of our large events. And we've chosen this date to for our public and press launch of the project. There'll be much more to see. The community tree nursery will be well developed, and the capital works will have finished at the hub. And there's a few other events there throughout the year that we'll continue public engagement with. Next slide, thank you. So Apple Day also gave us an opportunity to invite our partners from the Wendling Beck Environment Project. This is Glenn from the Wendling Beck Environment Project on this image here. And they were sharing their plans with their project with our visitors. So the Wendling Beck is a tributary of the River Wensum, and that runs south to north through land which is owned by the partners in this project. And this is a large-scale project which will transform over 2,000 acres of land for environmental benefit. It will improve habitats and invest in nature, and that's at the heart of this scheme, along with educating and influencing behaviour and informing the public, and in fact opening up access to the project land, which involves four farms right on our doorstep. So I'm going to hand over to Robin just to tell you a little bit more about the Wendling Beck Environment Project.
Thank you. So we're really just moving on. So this map gives you a feel of the sort of scope of the sort of area that we're talking around. So this is very much Gresson Hall, the site of Gresson Hall, the 50 acres that we manage. working in partnership with other local landowners that make up the Wendling Beck partnership. And it's basically covering the area of land that the Wensum Way runs through at the moment between Gresson and Dereham, and is centred around the Wendling Beck watercourse, which feeds into the Wensum, hence the name of the partnership. And as Jenny mentioned, this is all around sort of landowners working with other organisations, including Norfolk County Council, who own Gresson Hall, the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, to farm regeneratively, improving the biodiversity and improving water and soil quality, etc. And it's one of 8 Natural England net gain credit schemes running nationally. And it's very much been, I think, seen as a pilot for the way in which landowners can look to manage their land differently in response to the environmental pressures that we're all aware of. We're working very closely with colleagues in the environment team of the County Council, who've very much been involved in developing the Wendling Beck partnership from its earliest days. And it's something we're really pleased to be working with. And it obviously, in terms of the environmental hub, gives an opportunity for the scope of our activities to extend beyond the physical boundaries of the Gresson Hall site. So we are looking at opportunities to work with Wendling Beck partners, whether it's the landowners or others, such as the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, to support a sort of broader programme of events and engagement. So I think this is a really sort of exciting opportunity around this project, the way it enables Gresson to work with that wider group of landowners and sort of complementary organisations. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Ruth.
Actually. Need to go back a couple.
In. That's fine. Yeah, that'll do. Thank you. So this is the same sort of map with Gresson at the top and Dereham down at the bottom, which shows not only the area of the land holding, but also shows one of the key ways in which this project is also looking to improve walking and cycling, and thereby to facilitate, amongst other things, better access to the site at Gresson, mindful of the previous conversation we were having about limited sort of public transport routes. So as part of this project, and linked to the Platinum Jubilee trails funded through the Platinum Jubilee funding, is the creation of a new cycling route that runs from Dereham all the way up to Gresson Hall, following the line broadly taken by the Wensum Way and the spur of the Wensum Way that currently reaches down towards Dereham. So this would provide a new walking and cycling route that would connect Dereham directly to the site at Gresson Hall, which would be a really sort of important step forward, and would also provide an opportunity for more people to get access to those areas of land within the Wendling Beck partnership, and to engage with interpretation and activities supporting that wider work around farming in a more sustainable way. We can go on to the next slide, please. So this is just an example of what one of those cycling routes might look like. This is obviously something that the Norfolk Environment team have got a lot of experience in developing and upgrading walking and cycling routes. So that gives you a feel for what that cycling route might look like. And I think it will be called the Wendling Way. Move on to the next slide, please. In addition to that new walking and cycling route, we're also exploring an opportunity, again, working closely with colleagues in the environment team and the Wendling Beck partners, creating a couple of new bridges across the river at the base of the Gresson Hall site, principally to provide access to an area of water known as Dillington Car, which previously supplied irrigation water to support the blackcurrants on the farm, but which is a wonderful habitat. And if we go on to the next slide, please. Ruth. This is a sort of close-up of the so the Gresson Hall site on the north side of the river and Gorgate Farm on the south side of the river. And bottom left, you can see the expanse of water known as Dillington Carr. And the proposal is to create a couple of bridging points, which would enable visitors to go across the river from the Gresson Hall farm site, and then access bird hides and walks that enabled them to enjoy the views across Dillington Hyde. And I think we can go on to the next slide. That's a view of the Dillington Carr, looking back towards the site at Gresson Hall. We can go on to the next slide, please. And that's the view across the Carr that potentially visitors could have, including from both walkways and a new hide. It's a really interesting location and habitat, Dillington Carr, and we think it would be a real asset to the site to enable visitors to explore this as part of a visit to Gresson Hall. And this is actually on the Gorgate Farm side of the river, so this is within the property of one of these landowners within the Wendling Beck partnership. So this is not an area that visitors currently have access to, clearly. We can go on to the next slide, please, Ruth. And this is just an idea of the sorts of materials that might be used to create a suitably sympathetic bird hide in that location. We're also looking at potentially creating a number of other structures, again, sympathetic to the landscape, that could be used for schools and other learning activities. And I'll hand back to Jenny at that point.
Thank you. So as part of this package of work, we are linking into the other NCC project that I mentioned, Monument, which supports unpaid carers for people living with dementia. And we're using a little bit of funding from this project from our colleagues in the environment team to work up concept designs to improve pathways around Union Farm and down to the proposed bridging site that Robin was just talking about. Again, to make sure that it's accessible to all, and it will benefit visitors with impaired mobility and visitors with young children, perhaps coming with buggies. So at the moment, these plans are in the concept stage, and we're consulting the public and also with the Norfolk County Council Access Officer. Next slide, please. And then through a government grant called the Community Renewal Fund, which the environment team have some funding through that funding stream. We're doing some feasibility and design work about encouraging sustainable access to the site. We've mentioned transport to the site several times this morning, and we're looking at the feasibility of installing EV charging points and encouraging other methods of green travel. So that's just two other funding streams that are feeding into our broader project. The last slide, please. So just in summary, the work on the hub to repurpose the south wing is due for completion next month, around about the time that we'll reopen the site to the public. And those trial learning activities that I mentioned are taking place in the spring term. And work at the community tree nursery has been progressing over the winter months and will be carrying on. And we're also planning some interpretation in this area and up at the hub, so that we'll be telling our visitors about what's happening. We've got those events coming up in May, and we plan our official project launch at Open Farm Sunday in June. So thank you very much for listening and inviting us along today, and we hope to perhaps welcome you at Gresson Hall next time to tell you more about the project as it progresses.
Thank you for that. It's very informative. And so the environmental hub will be a sort of a permanent feature, but partially funded out of non-museums budget. Is that correct?
Yes. So the capital works, as I mentioned, funded through the Norfolk County Council Capital Programme and a number of other funding programmes that are supporting different aspects of the project. And as you'll have seen from that presentation, there's quite a few different sort of wheels turning on this one at the moment in terms of funding. But it's sort of external project funding, primarily working through the environment team.
Okay. Particular interest to Dereham members, I would think. Philip.
A chat with John Jones the other week, but I think from a Dereham point of view, we're more interested in how the access into Dereham will occur, because obviously the roads from Gresson Hall, as you know, into Dereham aren't the greatest and aren't let's say the most friendly for walkers or for cyclists. So have there been any thoughts on that? And of course, I believe it'll sort of really end up in sort of Dereham Marketplace or in Dereham itself, sort of idea of the trail. It seems to be all very nice, if I may say so, your end, but our end perhaps needs a bit of finessing and a bit of thought to it. And I think, you know, people, Town Council and presume Breckland also will be very interested in perhaps helping, you know, at the Dereham end to make it work.
Sounds like a good use for 106 monies.
Well, if I come back on that, I think with the Jubilee Trails, there is one of the deputy lieutenants is arranging a load of walks, which actually I think are connected to royalty. And it might be something which we could connect in with the Breckland refurbishment of the Queen Mother's Garden in Dereham, because that would be quite a sort of, almost if you're having a trail, a nice ending of the trail.
Any more? John.
Thank you. I'll just say what an exciting project, well, both the Wendling Way and overall the environmental hub. I came to the Apple Day and I brought some of my family along. My little granddaughter was really fascinated by it all, and it was going down very well with the public. So marvelous project, well done, and look forward to seeing it progress.
Any more questions? No. Okay, so thank you for that, and we look forward to getting further updates, particularly about the Dereham end of the trail. I think that virtually concludes our visitor numbers. Is that something that you've had?
We do have that, Chairman, and we can perhaps add those to the minutes. Obviously, Gresson Hall's been closed to the public during the fair.
Understood.
But
yeah.
we can circulate the museum service visitor numbers as part of the minutes.
So the recommendation is that we note the report. I think that's fairly easy to do. Do we have anything on the date of next meeting?
Yes, Chairman, the next meeting is Monday, the 20th of June at 10 o'clock, but venue to be confirmed. We're just checking the restrictions with the museums nearer the time.
So is the preferred venue Gresson Hall subject to restrictions? And then we'll try and get back to Thetford later in the year.
Yes.
Okay, any other matters anyone has? Okay, meeting closed.